Hey everyone, my name is Jeff McCarthy. I'm a mortgage broker and mortgage advisor, and I make these strategy guides because let's face it, over the past 2 years, it was really tough to buy a home. Interest rates are climbing, home prices really never really came down, and so it was really, really tough to navigate. So I wanted to come up with some cool strategies and also show you why is it always a good time to buy if you're ready to buy. So let's dive into this, and I want to also say that by the end of this, you'll realize that we might be in this like little Goldilocks period of time where it might be really beneficial for you as a buyer to get into the market because we can do a couple of things that we weren't able to do from say 2020 and 2021. So we'll dive right into this and we'll show you exactly what you need to get done. All right. So I'm in the corner over here, the top left-hand corner right here, and we're just going to dive right into this because it's really important. A lot of information, so I want to kind of quickly get through this so I don't bore you guys as much as possible. So let's unpack what we're going to go over. We're going to go over, is it the time to buy? Obviously, that's a big question right now. Higher interest rates, home prices really haven't come down. Does it make sense to buy? Rate versus price. This is really important. How interest rates and how they climb or go down, how that affects your purchasing power. We're going to look at strategies for this market. This is really important because for every market, there's good strategies. And for right now, there's some really good strategies that you can take advantage of as a buyer. And then we're going to look at how do we find the homes that can offer these strategies. Like once we're ready, hey, we're ready to enter the market. Where do I find the homes that might be able to help us kind of deploy the strategy that we're going to look at? So is it the time to buy? This is really important. And the most important aspect to really look at is building equity. Building equity will always take place because you're always going to do one of two things. You're always going to be paying down principal and you're always going to be able to appreciate in some markets. Obviously, there's some markets where there is depreciation and that's because of the recession or there might be some type of financial crisis like we saw back in 2008. But for the vast majority of the time that you're in your home, you are going to be building equity. And so equity comes in two forms. One, paying your mortgage. Every month when you pay your mortgage, a tiny little bit gets applied to your principal and that gets added to the equity. And then the other one is appreciation. So obviously, every year you're in your home, market conditions happen, and you slightly appreciate between 3 and 7%. Although right in the middle, about 4 to 5% is kind of where we see the yearly trend kind of sit. And obviously, both of those together equals the total equity in your home. So let's just take a look at a couple scenarios. We're going to look at one from last year when rates were a little higher. We're going to look at one that is current from this year where rates kind of dropped a little bit. So in this situation, we have a home, $350,000. We're going to put 3% down like a first-time home buyer. And back in a few months ago, just even 3 months ago, rates were actually 7.5, even a little bit higher. So in this case, this is 2023. And in this situation, even with higher interest rates, we're looking at a total principal paid for 1 year. So we're going to look at a 1 year kind of scope at this. And 1 year, you're going to be paying $3,129 towards the principal of your home, even at 7.5%. You combine that with what I just called an annualized appreciation right in the middle between 4 and 5 at 4.5%. We're going to look at about $15,750 for that first year you're in your home. When you add that together, that's going to be the equity in 1 year, and that's going to equal $19,879. So not bad. Rates are at 7.5%. A couple of years ago, a lot of economists and saying was looking 2023 was going to be looking at a flat type of appreciation, and we didn't see that at all. We saw pretty good demand, and we saw appreciation right at about 4%. So even though a down year turned into a pretty up year, and interest rates climbed, people still saw appreciation. Now we can fast forward to this year. We're basically going to do the same scenario, $350K as a purchase price, 3% down, but interest rates dropped to 6.5%. And now in 2024, we're going to look at the principal paid. We're going to look at $3,793, almost $3,800 now you paid in the principal simply because your rate dropped. Now, when you combine that with the same amount of appreciation at 4.5%, we're looking at $15,750. Just by waiting to rates drop again now, your equity in 1 year has grown to $20,543. So almost $1,000 has grown in equity for you simply because rates have dropped by 1%. So you're going to still be building equity no matter what. And that's when it's a really good time to buy, is when you guys are ready to think about, hey, we've got our finances in order. We've got the down payment. We're ready to get this mortgage payment under control. We're going to start building equity once you guys are ready to pull the trigger. Now, one thing I really like to look at is competition, because this is what really dominated the crazy appreciation growth during 20 and 21. Now, things have gotten a lot quieter, as you probably heard on the news. Rates got it to 8%. That really stopped demand. And we'll see this in this graph here. So this graph is pretty cool. It shows us in the first part. Let me get my pen here. It shows us in the first part that when rates were at 3% right here, 50 million people could afford a home at $400,000. So 50 million people back in 2020 and 2021, when rates were low, 50 million households could afford a mortgage at $400,000. Now we fast forward to 7%, 27 million people could afford a home at that price. So just in really under a year, almost half of the people, 23 million people, couldn't afford a home anymore, simply because rates went from 3% all the way up to 7%. It just killed people's affordability. And now when rates, and this was done October 20th, 2023, so just a few months ago, when rates got to 8%, you saw 22 million people now couldn't afford a home. So really, as of October, 28 million people were basically priced out of the market. And one other thing is, for every 1 million people, for every 1% drop in interest rate or increase in interest rate, 5 million people either enter the market or come out of the market just because of could they qualify or they couldn't qualify. Now, this was done in October, and when I made this slide, and I didn't want to really amend it to the current, because I wanted to show you that rates have dropped by that 1%. So what has changed though is the rates dropped as the holiday season really got going. And a lot of people put the brakes on buying a home or any purchase, obviously, during the holiday season. So we really haven't seen that big demand come back, because even though rates have dropped, it dropped during the holiday season. So this is one of the really good moments where, a lot of people are kind of just waking up from the holidays and saying, oh, rates dropped, maybe we should buy a home. And as we see the year kind of continue, we'll see those 5 million people start entering the market. Now, this is a great time for VA FTHB. That means first-time homebuyers. DPA means down payment assistance. I couldn't type all that in there. And then obviously FHA and VA are different loan programs. VA is for veterans, and then FHA is just for any type of person who wants to utilize the FHA program. So this is a really good time for all of these programs to really start thinking about, I need to enter the market. And the reason is competition. Back in 2020 and 2021, people that were VA, FHA, any type of first-time home buyer, they really didn't see any traction when they were submitting offers, and most of their offers were never even in contention, simply because they didn't have enough cash, they couldn't cover any types of contingencies, and they were just usually very frustrated. Right now, things have flipped. Sellers want to sell their home, and any seller is really looking and thinking very, very positively for all four of these different programs. So even though competition has come down, which is great, sellers are still feeling the pinch, and they are accepting FHA, VA, first-time home buyers, anybody that needs to use a down payment assistance. So this is a really good reason on why we might be wanting to think, maybe I should get back into the market right now. Now, rate versus price. This is very interesting. We're going to look at a pretty cool little kind of scale here. So back in February of 2022, rates were about 3.4%. And someone who was buying a $350,000 home was paying about $1,525, just the principal and interest. We're not talking about taxes or insurance. They were paying about $1,525 for principal and interest on that $350,000 house. You fast forward just about 4 months later, rates got up to 5%, 5.49%. And for the same payment, you are now only able to afford a $277,000 home for that same monthly payment of $1,525. Now, as we progressed and got, into later part of 2022, when rates started to get really high, rates were about 6.5% in September. And now for that same payment, you were only able to afford a $249,000 home. Now, as we got into 2023 and rates went into even higher territory, I didn't even put 8% because they went to 8% for a little bit, and then they were kind of sitting in the high sevens and mid sevens. So at 7.5%, you were now able to afford a $225,000 home for that same monthly payment. So right now, we're kind of seeing where we were back in September of 2022 at 6.5%. So we've gained some of our purchasing power back, but as we see when we kind of look at the strategies, which is what we're going to look at next, we can really regain a lot of that purchasing power back and also create affordability for any buyer that really is thinking about entering the market. So let's look at the strategy, because this is really the heart of the whole presentation. How do we enter the market and really have a great foothold to get what we want out of the home that we might want and the price point that we're looking for? So we're going to look at basically what I call a seller buy down strategy. So we're going to kind of look at here, and we're going to look at a 2023 market, because this is really interesting here. And we're going to move this into the 2024 market here. So in 2023, when rates were at 8.125%, your monthly payment was $3,156. Now, most people, what happens is when they want to create affordability, they need to reduce the interest rate. A lot of people think it's purchase price reduction, but it's really interest rate that causes the payment just to soar. So in this type of situation, and this is the strategy I used throughout the whole entire 2023, and obviously right now is still a big factor, we're going to use a 3% seller credit. So we're going to take the seller's money and we're going to apply to buy down the rate. So in this instance, you went from 8.125 to 7.25%, and that saved your payment $177 per month, and the mortgage payment is under $3,000 at $2,978. So that is really helpful. So anybody who has a budget, I don't want to go past $3,000. At $350K in the H, your budget's already blown here. So in this type of situation, let's look at the 2024 market. This is why it's really powerful. Rates are not 8.125% anymore. They're 6.8%. And when we apply that same seller credit, like we see in column 2, when we apply that, now we can look at a $350,000 house. We can buy the rate down to 5.899%. That's crazy. That's crazy. And this is not, we don't look at this. We're just going to look at the payment here. So the payment now is $2,677. So we've pretty much saved almost $500 from this payment at 8.125. We're saving an additional, couple $100 from 6.8%. because the payment there was $2,844. So now we can buy that same home just a few months ago, back in, let's say, October, when rates were 8.125. We can buy that same $350,000 home, but the mortgage payment is only $2,600, $2,677. Now, that's an all-in payment, just to let you know. So that's including your taxes, your homeowner's insurance, your mortgage insurance, all that stuff. So that's an all-inclusive payment. Obviously, I kind of guesstimated it. Taxes and insurance payment may go up and down, but it still stays relatively the same, and we're well below $3,000. This is where we can start creating real affordability, because if you have a budget and you say, look, I don't even want to go above $2,800, you weren't able to even accomplish that in the latter part of 2023, even with the rate buy down at 7.25, because your payment is still pretty close to $3,000 a month. Now, since rates have come down a little bit, our buy down power, so the buy down using 3% seller credit. So that's really that's the kind of big caveat. That's the stipulation. We need that seller credit so we can permanently buy down. This is a permanent buy down. So at 5.899%, let me get rid of that so you can see that a little bit better. At 5.899%, that interest rate does not move. This is a 30-year fixed. It's not an adjustable rate. This will never change. And that is very, very powerful because it keeps your payment low, and it always will keep your payment low. Now, let's look at the current market. I kind of want to show you the strategy just one more time because it's so important. So right now, we're at 6.8%. Now, we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, 6.87%. But the one thing is the buy down doesn't really change. It can actually go a little bit farther. So this would be FHA. Okay, on an FHA loan, okay, we can buy the rate from 6.8% to 5.25%. That is massive, massive movement right there. So now our payment all in is $2,610 essentially. And that's at that same $350,000 purchase price. So what if you're like, you know what? I'm comfortable with $2,884. Like that's okay for my budget. And the houses that I'm looking at, $350,000 doesn't really check all my boxes. This is where using the seller buy down and that 3% credit, we can really increase your affordability and increase your purchasing power. Because right now, what we can do is I can take that same rate at 5.25. Okay, I can take that same payment that you're comfortable with at $2,884, and I can increase your purchasing power by $50,000. So now you can go look at a $400,000 home. We can use a seller buy down to buy down that rate to 5.25, 5.25, and your payment is the same payment at $2,884, which would be your same payment at the current market at 6.8%. So this is how we can take the market, kind of negotiate it in your terms, help you increase your affordability by really $50,000, but keep your payment to where you are really, really comfortable. And the best part about this is we don't have to refi. This is such a massive movement. This is really why we're in kind of like the Goldilocks little era of buying, because right now, if rates are sitting between 6.8 and 7.2% right now. If we can buy your rate down to 5.25, and then, to be honest with you, if we can buy your rate down to anywhere in the fives, even at 6%, 5.99, 5.25, 5.5%, any one of those interest rates that we can buy down to, you don't have to spend $10,000 or $15,000 in a refinance to get your rate at 6.8% or 7%, even higher. We don't have to refinance. So that saves you about $10,000 or $15,000 on a $400,000 home. So this is why it's super powerful, because the seller right now, they're willing to negotiate. And it becomes your benefit in this type of system, in this type of instance, because one, we can increase your purchasing power, we can keep your affordability the same, and you won't have to refi down the road and spend another $10,000 or $15,000 to get your interest rate lower because you're a little bit higher than everyone else. That's why it's super, super powerful right now. And this is a great time to enter the market. All right. And so we kind of talked about this. This is why we're in the Goldilocks zone. Rates are not as high right now to keep, rates are not low enough right now to increase a lot of competition. And rates are high enough right now where you have a lot of buyers just kind of sitting on the sideline waiting for the rates to drop or for home prices to drop. You have a lot of people sitting in there in that little zone trying to wait. So that means for you, somebody who's like, you know what? I think this does make sense for you. This puts you in a really, really good position as a buyer. So number one, you're willing to negotiate with the seller, or I should say the seller is willing to negotiate with you. Back in 2020 and 2021, this was never even a moment. Sellers had the upper hand and buyers were faced with just bending their knee to a seller just to get into the home they wanted. Two, your purchasing power has increased. We just saw that in the last slide. We could go from $350,000 to $400,000, keep the same payment, but increase your purchasing power by $50,000. So your purchasing power has increased. We don't have to refi. In most cases, and in most cases of where I'm seeing it, this is in January of 2024 right now, I am locking most loans where that buyer does not have to refinance 6 months, a year down the road once rates have dropped. And sellers are willing to accept FHA and VA. This is gigantic because in 2021 and 2020, we weren't seeing that. FHA and VA, unfortunately, were not really in high contending positions for any seller to accept the offer. And so you saw a lot of frustrated FHA and a lot of frustrated VA buyers out there. So after we're like, all right, we're ready to enter the market. Okay, how do we enter the market? So we're going to look at a couple different ways that you can look for homes that can start kind of deploying out the strategy that we've just talked about. All right, searching for the home. So the first thing I want you to go do is go to Redfin. And Redfin, you can search for the area of the city or the county, wherever you want to search in, and you can kind of start getting a little bit more refined on the homes you're looking for. So after you type in your search area, you're going to go all the way to the right, and there's this little All Filters tab. When you click that All Filters tab, a drop-down menu, or really a menu that you can scroll up and down, is going to pop up. The first thing you can check is this, time on Redfin. So this, as you can see, has a little drop-down, and you can drop down the menu, and you want to look at homes that have been on the market for more than 30 days. So why? Obviously, homes that have been on the market 30 days, the seller's feeling the pinch, and they are willing to negotiate. They may have even dropped their price to make their home look more attractive. So this is a great way to kind of, hey, do I like any homes that have been on the market for 30 days? If I do, I have a really good time to negotiate with the seller and actually get the types of terms I want to buy the home. Now, the second part is, if you scroll down a little bit longer on that All Filters, you have a price reduced. You can see that little checkbox right there. If you check on that, this drop down will open up, and you can see how many homes have been price reduced in the last 14 days, 7 days, 30 days. And that's a really good indication that the sellers are willing to negotiate. So when you see that, you're like, hey, I might be able to go in there and negotiate. Sometimes it works out where we go back to the list price. So if they've dropped it $10,000, we make an offer of saying, hey, we're going to go back to the original list price, but give us that $10,000 in a seller credit so I can buy down the interest rate, which will help me create more affordability. So that really, really helps. The time on Redfin, and then what homes have been recently price reduced within a certain amount of time. You guys can pick that. So those are great ways for you to really start looking at homes that might be able to negotiate on your behalf, on the realtors or whatever, and be able to get what you want on your behalf for the home and the price point and really the payment that you're looking for. So I want to say thank you. I know I was a little bit longer, but I really wanted to go through everything like that because I really do feel this is a great time for buyers. We can be put in a position where we can create affordability, keep your payment, somewhat manageable, but also increase your purchasing power. We can really do that and get you in the home in less than 30 days because it's really still quiet out there, and I'm closing loans in less than 30 days. So if you have any questions, my contact information is at the top. Feel free to reach out via email, text, or call me. Your realtor's information is right to the right as well. You can reach out to them and they can reach out to me. And as before, have a great new year and look forward to helping you guys get into your home. All right, take care.